Superheroes come from all kinds of places. Sometimes they're Bob next door. Sometimes they're a prodigal child between a mutant and the clone of his ex-girlfriend who is sent to the future to grow up and then returns as a grizzled old man with a metal arm. That's comic books. I'm Adam Andrews, and this is the top 10 superheroes who came from the future. Number 10. Bishop. Bishop comes from a terrible 22nd century that became a pretty horrible dystopia after an event called the Summer's Rebellion. Bishop wants nothing more than to prevent this future from happening, and that is basically his entire personality. To prevent his future apocalyptic future, he travels back to the present day to find the X-Men and to become Professor Xavier's bodyguard. Eventually, Bishop seems to think that his future is created thanks to the birth of Hope Summers, which leads to him becoming a bit of a villain, but also leads to a conflict with someone we will talk about in just one sec. Now, his time-jumping abilities are granted by a cybernetic arm that he possesses, but his actual mutant ability is to absorb and redirect any kinetic energy that is used against him or that is released in his general vicinity. He's easily a favorite X-Men for a lot of people, even if he lets his knowledge of a possible future guide his actions into some unfavorable places sometimes. Number 9. Cable. Cable, or Nathan Summers, is the offspring of Scott Summers and Madeline Pryor, which should make you think that this guy isn't from the future at all. You see, Mr. Sinister had planned the birth of Nathan, hoping that he could use Nathan against the mutant known as Apocalypse, but that didn't work out. Instead, Apocalypse infected Nathan with a techno-organic virus. Because of this, and because his parents feared Apocalypse would hunt Nathan down, they sent their child to the future. It is true that adult Cable and Apocalypse do have a lot going on, as Cable does return fully grown to the modern day to stop Apocalypse, but also to face an evil version of himself. It's a lot, but that's time travel. Cable has not just one, but two modes of time travel. He can use a special future gadget to transport himself as well as his allies to a different point in time, but Cable can also use his telepathic abilities to send his astral form back in time as well, although he's only ever done that once. If you think about it, I'm technically talking to you from the past, since this is being filmed like 3 days before it goes up, or maybe it's months since I filmed it, maybe even years. You should like this video or comment and send a message to past me so that me, of your present, aka my future, can see it and appreciate it. Number 8. Spider-Man 2099. Instead of getting bitten by a radioactive super spider, Miguel O'Hara's DNA was biologically mixed with the spider's DNA to save his life after he was forcibly hooked on a not far off future substance by his employer. If that sounds convoluted, well, yeah, it is, but it also sounds right at home in a comic book. Although the process of gaining his powers differed from Peter Parker, Miguel O'Hara was still granted many of the same abilities at a pretty similar level as Spider-Man. One thing that differs largely from Spider-Man is Miguel's spider sense, because he doesn't have one. Instead, Miguel has advanced super senses like Daredevil. Miguel also has some abilities that are just wholly unique to him, like super speed or telepathic communication abilities, which are both really cool. He also has fangs and claws that are not so cool. They're more like freaky, but they're cool for combat, I guess. On top of all those powers though, Miguel is from the year 2099, which means that he naturally has a much more advanced set of technology at his disposal when he finally comes together with the Spider-Verse. Number 7. Booster Gold. Booster used to be a star college football player in the future who was caught betting on his own games and was expelled. So, luckily, this isn't a list of morally upstanding heroes. Booster got a job at a space and superhero museum, and in keeping with his interesting choice of morals, he found and stole Rip Hunter's time sphere, along with a bunch of other superhero gadgets. Using his future son's time sphere, he went back in time with the museum's robot named Skeets. Now, thanks to his knowledge of future crimes that would come to pass, he could easily go and stop them, and he did this becoming a hero, earning himself both profit and fame. Thankfully though, he did actually find some humility and eventually became a real hero, traveling throughout time, fixing the cracks in history and fighting evil time-traveling threats with no praise or applause except for, of course, us readers. Number 6. Iron Lad. Though this character's armor is quite similar to Tony Stark's and shares many of his Iron Man suit's features, hence the Iron Lad name, this is actually the younger version of the one known as Nathaniel Richards, aka King the Conqueror, or aka his other like 30 names. In the year 3016, Nathaniel Richards gets rescued by his future evil self before a lethal attack by bullies. Nathan is given new armor and trained by the villain to make himself even better, if that makes sense. time travel. But this inadvertently made the young Nathaniel turn against his future older self, and he uses the armor to travel to the modern day Earth 616. From there, Iron Lad's armor allows him to create temporal divergences, which let him manipulate time and travel through it. Now, going back in time, he eventually became the leader of the Young Avengers in order to balance the scales for things that he would do later in life. But because time is complex sometimes, he inevitably goes on to actually eventually still become Kang the Conqueror and do all the horrible things that Kang the Conqueror does. Even knowing your future doesn't stop you from being able to change it, apparently. I guess. Number 5. Bart Allen. Bart Allen was born in the late 30th century, which is around the same time of the Legion of Superheroes. He is the grandson of Barry Allen, which meant that Bart was born with his grandfather's super speed instead of having to receive it in an accident. Unfortunately though, Bart also suffered from a super hyper accelerated metabolism, which means he was aging at an insane rate. Like when he was 2 years old, he looked 12. To stop Bart from developing mental problems, Bart was placed in a virtual reality that kept pace with his aging. Now it turns out that doesn't really solve the problem at all. Instead, his grandmother, Iris Allen, decided to take Bart into the past to find Wally West, the third and arguably most powerful Flash. Now Wally pushed Bart to use his super speed at extreme new levels, which shocked Bart's metabolism back to regular speedster levels. Because of his time in the virtual reality though, Bart had no concept of danger, so he just kept acting before actually thinking. Batman, having the best sense of humor, decided to give Bart the nickname Impulse. Number 4. Rip Hunter. Rip Hunter is actually the future son of Booster Gold, who we talked about earlier, which raises a lot of questions. But he is also the DC Universe's leading authority in time travel. If you'll recall, Booster is from the future and used Rip's own technology to travel back in time in the first place. But this was before Rip was ever actually born in Booster's timeline, and now you understand why time travel is incredibly confusing. Other than being Booster's son from the future, Rip Hunter's origins and true identity are actually a total mystery. But this is on purpose, as keeping his origins and identity a mystery safeguards this time-traveling hero from time-traveling villains that would try to erase him from existence. And that's because Rip Hunter defends the time stream as a time master. Very cool. In his earliest appearances, his portrayal was more in line with the serial type of adventure he was involved in, so more adventure-based stories than a true superhero. Until the 1980s, when he became much more focused on the future implications of present events, which led to a worldwide apocalyptic event, and it was his obsessive goal to try and stop it. Now more recently though, his origins seem to suggest that he is from the 25th century, and now he's more of a protective overseer. But in all his iterations, he's cool as hell, and how could he not be with a name like Rip Hunter? Super cool. Number 5. Number 5 was one of the 43 children born at once, and one of the 7 children adopted by Sir Reginald Hargreaves in Dark Horse Comics' Umbrella Academy. 5 has the natural born ability to travel through time. While he isn't technically from the future, at the age of 10, 5 traveled 20 years into the future and found himself in an apocalyptic wasteland, forcing him to spend decades trying to travel back to his native 1960s. The failure of this slowly drove him completely insane. When he finally did travel back in time, he was captured and modified by the surgeons of the Temps Eternalis, who mixed strands of DNA from a bunch of killers with 5's own DNA, which somehow made him the perfect killer, quote unquote. They also helped refine his powers though, teaching him how to perform micro jumps in time, making him incredibly fast. When he rebelled against the Temps and finally returned to the past, 5 days before the apocalypse, 5 regressed back from an old man to an unaging 10-year-old in transit. And that's why he remains the only childlike member of the Umbrella Academy when he is technically a fully grown man in a child's body. Freaky. Number 2. Waverider. The original Waverider would be Matthew Ryder from the year 2030. Now in this future world, the world has been ruled for 20 years by an armored despot known as Monarch, who has destroyed all of Earth's superheroes. Ryder was rescued from a collapsing building as a child by an unknown superhero, which inspired him to fight back as an adult. Knowing that Monarch had once been a hero before some unknown event turned him to evil, Ryder volunteers as a time travel test subject in hopes of traveling to the past and preventing Monarch from ever coming to exist in the first place. But where other similar experiments failed, His succeeded. Matthew entered the time stream and became Waverider, able to move back and forth through time as well as see people's most likely futures by touching them, which is super cool. And finally, in at number 1, it's Keyoshi Morales. When a group of 5 Captain Americas from different realities are brought together in Captain America Corps number 1 from 2011, we get a look at Keyoshi Morales, the great-grandnephew of Luke Cage and the 25th century's Commander A, which I'm sure the A stands for America. Keyoshi is a much more physically imposing character, standing at what looks like almost 7 feet tall, and he was definitely the most physically imposing Captain America among the Captain Americas gathered. Instead of using a vibranium shield, Kiyoshi's suit can generate energy shields on each arm, which resemble the normal Captain America vibranium shield, kind of like Captain America 3099. Now his suit is much more advanced as well, as you'd expect from the 25th century Captain America stand-in. For example, it features a neuroweb, which allows him to tap into wireless systems and store information. He had all the enhancements we'd expect from a Captain America, and he is just a super cool character who I really hope we get to see more of in the future, but for now, he is definitely my favorite of the members of the Captain America Corps. But that's the list. Thank you so much for giving us your time on Top 10 Nerd. I'm Adam Andrews. I'll catch you all in the flippy flop future. Peace out, nerds.